Hi everyone, Scott T here again. This time I'm going to show you some programming that I did while I was at VM Labs. It's probably in the last year before I left VM Labs. I asked if I could work on it kind of as a side project in addition to my normal work, and they agreed. It's eventually going to turn into hopefully a game. I was trying to work my way into game development, and it's based around the idea of drawing Bezier curves. And if you're not familiar with Bezier curves, here's a quick introduction. So a standard line has two endpoints, call them P1 and P2. And if you consider the line to exist from time t equals 0 to t equals 1, then you can draw the line by interpolating between those 2 points using the equation P1 times 1 minus whatever time plus P2 times time. And that gives you your final point. So for instance, if you want to find the point a quarter of the way down the line, then t would equal 0.25. You just plug that into the equation and you'll get your final point at that coordinate. So Bezier curves kind of extrapolate on this, and they use 3 control points instead of just 2. But again, it's just a simple interpolation, although the equation for the interpolation is a little more complicated. So let's say you have 3 points, P1, P2, P3. Now the equation for the interpolation is P1 times 1 minus t squared plus P2 times t times 1 minus t plus P3 times t squared. That gives you your final point. And if you plot this out, what will happen is the curve will start at P1 and it will end at P3. It will approach P2, but it won't touch it. And it's going to, when it starts out, if you imagine these control lines, it's going to start out tangentially to this direction on this control line, and it's going to end tangentially to this direction. So I'm not going to get this exactly right, but it'll look something like this. And there's the last control line. And the neat thing about Bezier curves is that the curve is entirely contained within these 3 control lines. So it becomes easier to do bounding boxes and to do collision detection. So how do you draw this? You need the equation, or you need to find the point at any arbitrary point along the curve. So one thing you could do is take really small steps in time along the curve, plotting as you go. But then how do you know if your steps are small enough to capture every pixel that's on that line? So there's a technique called central differencing that I use in the renderer. And basically what that does is, if I draw a new line here, it will find, for every step that you take, it will find the midpoint along the line. So what you do is you find the midpoint, you check if these 2 points are within 1 pixel of one another. If they are not, then you find the midpoint of the next line. Because the nice result of central differencing is that the curve that you get between the midpoint and the original point is another Bezier curve. So you can just keep applying the central differencing until you get down to a point where you are less than 1 pixel difference, and then you plot that. So you kind of recursively go down, then you come back up, and along the way you're going to be drawing the pixels until you get all the way to the end. So that's pretty much how you draw these curves, and I didn't actually get a chance to write a full game with it, but I do have a test bed that I used to test the various features of the engine that I wrote, so I'm going to show you that now. Okay, so what you see here is a test bed to let me test out various features of the rendering engine. And although the low-level engine can draw arbitrary curves. I wrote a higher level wrapper in C that kind of abstracts some of that away. And that wrapper can handle two different types of objects, collections of curves. One is an enclosure, which you see here as the black circle type object, which is actually comprised of 4 curves around the quadrants. And then the other type are free curves, which have endpoints that do not end at any other object. So you can see there's 2 of them hanging off the top and the left. Another feature is that each endpoint of the curves can be assigned a color, and it will interpolate between them as it draws the curve. So you can see it goes from red to green to blue to white as you go around the circle. You can also adjust the thickness of the curve. I'm pushing the up and down on the D-pad here, as you can see. There's some other debug stuff I added. If you hold down the NUON button, you get some debug information, which I don't remember what most of this is, but I think it's profiling to tell me how fast the renders are doing and where the bottlenecks are. If you press the C up button, it will toggle anti-aliasing on and off. It's kind of hard to tell, but with anti-aliasing on, it looks a little smoother. C left will toggle whether the object is filled or not. And C right will toggle the number of rendering MPs, although you can't really tell. It'll just make it render faster when there's lots of stuff on the screen. So each of these, this testbed has 4 modes to test out various features. This is the first mode, which is just a single object. You can move it around with the stick. If you hold down the start button and push the D-pad up and down, you can scale it. If you push left and right, you can rotate it. And this all happens very smoothly because these are just curves. They're not pre-rendered at all. If you hold down start and push A, you will toggle the various ways to fill this object. So you can, there's 3 different ways. You can toggle between a solid color, a large texture, which I think is limited to 64 by 64 or 128 by 128, something like that, and a small texture, which is limited to 16 by 16. So the large texture cannot be rotated or scaled. It's just drawn straight as it is, which would probably be used more for backgrounds that don't change a lot. The large small texture, it can be rotated and scaled. So if you hold down the start button and press C right and C left, you will be rotating. C up and C down will scale it. And if you hold down the start button and move the stick, it will move the texture around within the object. So you can line it up and get it how you want. So these will be used more for the game objects, enemies and whatnot. Let's see, what else can you do in this particular mode? I think that's it. So if you push the A button without the start button, it'll go to the next mode. Yeah, let me reduce the width of the objects here, or the lines. So this one's pretty simple. It just has the stick moves the object underneath. It was a way for me to test whether I could handle occlusion of objects. I don't think any of the other buttons do anything. So you push the A button again. We get to the third test, and this is a test of, I added sprite ability, so you can render sprites as well as curves, because I figured I'd need them for like smoke or enemy shots or something quick that I don't want to create a whole curve object for. So this one you can move around with the stick as well. If you hold down the start button and go up and down, you can scale it. Push left and right, C left and C right, you can rotate it. There's actually an object underneath this one, so if you push start and push A, you'll toggle the sprite off and you can see it. Push it again, it'll turn it back on. If you press start and then press the D-pad down, you'll toggle bilinear filtering. So this is just using straight pixel grabbing, whereas this is actually trying to filter between the pixels. If you push start, hold down start, and push up on the D-pad, you will toggle translucency of the sprite. And you can adjust the translucency by holding down start and pushing right or left on the D-pad. So I can increase it or decrease it as I want. Another thing that I added for debug, hold down start and push the L button, the left shoulder button, and you can toggle some debug dots. And these show you each tile that's being rendered on this sprite. Okay, so moving on to the next mode. This is the last mode of this test bed. This was a simple test of whether I could draw letters, because I knew that I would need to draw text, basically. So this one's pretty simple. You can move it around with the stick like normal. Hold down the start button, push left and right, you can rotate it. Sorry, C left and C right. Hold down the start button, push C up and C down, you can scale it. That's pretty simple. I wanted to see how well it could scale as well. Okay, so let's go to the second test bed, which has 4 modes again, but 2 of them are identical. So this is one of the new ones, the first new one. This shows translucency between objects. Both of these objects are translucent, and you can move the blue one around with the stick. If you hold down start and push A, you'll toggle between texturing on one, either one or both. And you can see those are translucent as well. If you hold down start and press right or left, you will change the translucency of the red object, increase or decrease. Up or down will change the translucency of the blue object, so I increase it or decrease the opacity. If you hold down start and press C left, you will toggle translucency entirely on or off for the red object, and C right will on or off for the blue object. Okay, press A again, you get to the familiar smiley sprite. Press A again, you get to the familiar text. Press A again. We'll get back to that initial one, only this time there's many of them on the screen. And this was a way for me to test how fast I could draw a lot of objects at the same time. You can see a little bit of graphic corruption at the bottom where some of the objects overlap the debug text, and that's due to the way that I am filling the object. I'll describe, and that's one of the main things that I would have to fix if I ever tried to finish this render. But with this particular mode, you can hold down start, push up and down, C up and C down, there we go, to increase or decrease the number of objects. C left and right increases or decreases by 10. So that's about it. You can download it from my site right now, burn it to a CD and try it. Be careful, sometimes it will crash if you do things like if you scale things up too big or if you add too many objects. Like, let's see if I can make it crash by adding too many objects here. Yeah, here it crashed. So it's not perfect, but it'll give you an idea of what I was working on. So I'll talk to you guys next time.